So today we're going to take a look at the Great War, as it was called early on. That would be World War I, the war to end all wars, is what it was called. We had the mentality that there would never be a war again after this horrible thing, but naturally we know that didn't work. So let's jump right into this now. We have to remember that we left off and we talked about imperialism. So before I jump into anything here, there are four main causes, main being an acronym for World War I. The M is militarism, and if you understand anything about militarism, that's building up your army and navy, and we talked about how the United States did that, and keep in mind, we're not the only ones. The A in main would be alliances. George Washington warned us to be weary of alliances, and it wasn't necessarily us, but Europe that is lining up based on who they are and who they weren't. We had two sides, and we'll go a little bit more into them here in a minute. The I would be imperialism, which we talked about as you go and take over another country in order to make them work for you, essentially. And lastly, the N is nationalism, people wanting their own countries. And that will kind of come into, there were some big empires that will be broken up at the end of World War I, and many new countries are created, and we'll get into that. It'll be fun, right? So, first thing we need to talk about is what is called the powder keg of Europe. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time here on this. As you can see, the part that's circled right here is called the powder keg of Europe. Now, a powder keg, per se, would be a barrel where you keep gunpowder. It'd be the most dangerous thing, and you would not want to go anywhere near it. However, in this little dot here in Sarajevo, Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, and that's the spark that set the kettle off, set the keg off, and all of Europe and most of the world will become enthralled in this conflict. Now, on the eve of World War I, there were a couple of alliances, but we'll come back to that. Now, the man responsible here for starting this is Gavril Princip. Gavril Princip is a member of a Serbian nationalist group, meaning he wants a Serbian nation. They were known as the Black Hand. He lived in Sarajevo. Problem is, that is part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So his mentality, and it's not uncommon to others, kill the king or the heir to the throne and leave him alone. So there have been protests. So Austria-Hungary sent down the heir to the throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Yes, there's a band named after Franz Ferdinand. They're from England area, I believe. Not really big anymore. Maybe I'm telling my day there. Anyway, so Franz Ferdinand and his wife go down to visit. Here they are coming out. Notice he is very easy to spot of his regalia. For this reason, I don't think our president would go anywhere looking like that, right? I mean, that's kind of like, please shoot me. But nonetheless, he did. Gavril Princip had a couple of encounters. Finally, he comes up here. He actually missed once. The driver took a wrong turn. And in the end, he will kill the driver, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife. Now, once they did this, the alliances start lining up. And we'll get to the alliances. But before we do, we have to understand what the United States said. The United States came out when this is going on, and notice this is 1914, right? Britannia, as be Britain, must be careful how she waives the rules. Notice Britain, England, blockade rule. He's trying to hit Germany. And there's neutral commerce, American shipping, and America is staying out of this. So we issue a proclamation of neutrality in 1914 saying we are not involved in this. We did the same thing in World War II, and so maybe we're following Washington and seeing that this is a bad thing. As we go through this, we'll see how we become enthralled and how England, our friendship with England, ultimately in both wars is going to become kind of the selling point. Now, the two sides we have the Allies, who were originally called the Triple Entente. That's a French word. They will be the ones here in blue. So France, England, which is ironic because they hated each other for years, and of course the biggest one on the block, Russia. And that's what scared Austria-Hungary at the initial start. They needed some friends, and they found that to declare war on Russia. Russia had a back-end deal with England and France, and so they jumped in. Now the other side we'll call the Triple Alliance, or the Central Powers, and that would be Germany, Austria-Hungary, and of course Italy. All of these other ones here that are kind of goldish are going to be neutral at the start. Some of them come in later on. Bulgaria gets involved, and Italy switches sides, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So this is what we're looking at now in the map. In the grand scheme of things, this tends to be a big problem here, the location, correct? Because they're in the central, and they can't really move things out, and so the danger of the Central Powers is to not fight a two-front war. Napoleon can't do it. Can't do it in World War I, and Hitler can't do it. It's impossible to fight a two-front war. So their mentality is, we're going to go take France, we're going to take England, and then we'll go after Russia. Okay? It doesn't necessarily work like that so well, but we'll talk about that. Now, the United States, as part of their proclamation of neutrality, said we're not going to aid anybody who is a belligerent nation. Right? So there we have the powers. Now, a belligerent means that you, whether vocally or physically or emotionally, are combative. All right? So in this case, they're physically combative. They are belligerent. You go home and start yelling with mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, uncle, aunt, whoever. You are a belligerent. And so the United States said, we're out of belligerents. Now, the real issue comes up with us in freedom of the seas, because remember who has the most powerful navy at this time? That would be the United States. And so ultimately, as we are floating around trying to get our trade going, some of these ships come under fire and are sunk. And ultimately, that's a big thing. So freedom of the seas is an important reason for the United States getting involved, because we want to do that. So freedom of the seas, there it is. Now we have a new style of war at this time. It's called trench warfare. The mentality was to not give up an inch. And there's many stories here, and maybe I'll show you when it's on the museum. But if you've ever heard of the story of the Lord of the Rings with J.R. Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien was a fighter in World War I, and he actually based a lot of stuff. For example, none shall pass was a battle cry of a French unit. That's later used by Gandalf in the stories and different things of that nature. But a trench was the idea to dig down, and you're going to do this. Now the problem is, with trench, it led to some other little problems. Namely, how do we get to the trenches? And so we have the onset of poison gas, chlorine gas, phosphate gas. We have airplanes dropping bombs. We have tanks that can come in, machine guns, flamethrowers, you name it. It was created to do nothing more than kill. So because of the trench, these horrible weapons of war are created, and the world has forever been changed, I guess you could say. Now, World War I quickly becomes what is called a war of attrition. War of attrition means there are not many victories going on, and basically whoever has the least amount of casualties or deaths will ultimately be the winner. And so people spend 7-8 months fighting over 1.5 miles, and we have 70,000 up to somewhere in the neighborhood of more than 250,000 dead in that time. And this is just a new big thing for us. We don't understand how to contemplate this. Now, in the next section, we're going to talk about how the United States really gets in here. So, there's that.